War report to his family, the 4th of July, 1941. The war in Russia is extremely bloody. The enemy has suffered losses previously unknown in this war. The Russian soldiers were told by their superiors that they would all be shot by us. Instead of surrendering, they shoot every German from behind. This provokes countermeasures on our part in return, which are quite severe. This process is escalating with the result that hecatombs of people lose their lives. On top of that, the unclear terrain. Everywhere forests, swamps, high crops with hidden Russians. In short, it is not exactly pleasant here. The day before yesterday, after we had cleared the forest and taken 4,000 hidden Russians prisoner, I drove on an embankment in the swamp. On both sides were thick alder bushes. The swamp to the right and to the left was knee-deep. Suddenly a Russian with a rifle in his hand jumped across the road about 100 steps in front of us. After only a few seconds, 7 or 8 guys like him followed. No one could tell if there were even more of them. For them, it was child's play to shoot us in the car on this road. It was 10 of them, 3 of us. They were hidden in the bushes, we were exposed in the open. For a minute we discussed what to do. The forest was quiet. Just by chance, 2 of our own vehicles, our reinforcement, drove by. Now we went against the Russians, yet we could not find them. They were hiding in the impenetrable swamp. 8 days ago we arrived at our combat position. During the last 2 days, we organized our troops and gave them a rest. Tomorrow we are advancing further to the east, into the Russian heartland. The fight is still not won yet, but the enemy is crumbling. The Russian airplanes have not shown up in days. That is a great advantage. We still have chickens and eggs and calves, but it will not be long and the country will be sucked dry. Letter to his wife, the 5th of July, 1941. We took quarters at a chemist's owned by an old Jew. He is happy that he got rid of the Bolsheviks. Apparently they have treated all people with property really badly. We have seen quite a few big farms and estates. All owners have been eliminated by the Bolsheviks. The farms are neglected, destroyed, abandoned, and in a terrible state. They had served as barracks for workers or as hut camps. The Russian soldiers do not seem to be enthusiastic Bolsheviks. The prisoners primarily complain about poor provisions and that their superiors have treated them badly. Apparently there is no real Volksgemeinschaft people's community. Since the commissars prevented soldiers from defecting and forced them at gunpoint into battle, the soldiers beat the commis, SARS to death in return. Letter to his wife, the 6th of July, 1941. After having finished our battle, we advanced to the east in short marches. Because the troops are crowded together, the advance is slower than we would like. The unbelievable state of the roads comes on top of that. Dear Lord, this is a sinister country, north of the Pripyat swamps. It is one huge forest with miles and miles of swamps in between where one sinks knee-deep in mud. It looks much better from above. Yesterday I flew over my marching columns with the Storch, and everything looked like lovely toys. The Russian, who was right in front of us, is now destroyed. The whole incident was incredibly bloody. In some cases, we gave them no quarter at all. The Russian was like a beast towards our injured soldiers. In return, our men shot and beat to death everything in brown uniforms. The vast forests are still full of scattered soldiers and fugitives, some of them unarmed, some armed, and they are extremely dangerous. Even when we send divisions through these forests, tens of thousands of them manage to avoid capture in this impassable terrain. Stalin has given orders to the retreating troops to destroy everything we could benefit from. Thus, pillaging and burning, as in Napoleonic times, and to some extent as in 1915, is on again. According to my superior, Colonel General von Weichs, only 2 Soviet pump buildings are left in Minsk, a city with a population of 200,000. Everything else is burnt. In Kozau, where our quarters are, 1/3 of the houses are left. Red commissars have burnt the city centre. The population is probably fed up with this. It is the 4th time for them since 1915. In the south, things are not as good as they are here at the centre front section. In the Ukraine, the Russian retreats orderly and systematically. Thus he is probably able to destroy lots of things. He is too strong to be overrun. His next huge defensive position seems to be at the river Dnieper. Letter to his wife, the 8th of July, 1941. Leaden sky, 40 degrees Celsius, as they say, impenetrable clouds of dust, deep sand. These are the features of the day. Today I drove to the army group next to us and told Field Marshal von Bock about our battles. He said they were among the toughest of this campaign so far, maybe the most difficult ones. Well, I must say I have noticed that. Now we have fallen far behind. We march 30th to 35 kilometers, about 20 miles every day. We can hardly force the horses through the sand, but we need to go further. Since our motorized forces fight 200 kilometers in front of us, on their own, they might be able to overpower the Russian without our help. Then we have to walk even further. This afternoon we had our first bath. It was pure pleasure. The village where our quarters are, Liakovici, is located in one of these typical swamp valleys with a little river. Our soldiers already have a tan and wear only swimming trunks in this heat when they are at rest. Be it in the city centre or elsewhere, there are naked men everywhere. Today we had to execute a communist woman who had treated injured Russians behind our backs and operated against us with all possible means. That is the war. The day before yesterday, Balzan found the first house bug on my trousers. I live in rooms without any furniture. It is all so shabby and run down, it is indescribable. Letter to his wife, the 8th of July, 1941. The roads are littered with the wreckage and debris of destroyed Russian combat vehicles and lorries, cannon, ammunition, decaying horses. The terrain is getting vaster and vaster. Forests and more forests, miles and miles of swamps in between, a few isolated villages. It is always the same image. We still find scattered Russians in the forests, but nobody knows how many are still in there hiding. It is impossible to search these forests and swamps. The scattered Russian soldiers only want to go home as civilians and be farmers again. They do not want to be taken to Germany as prisoners, and do not bother about the war. Letter to his wife, the 11th of July, 1941. Again 2 marching days, both boiling hot with indescribable amounts of dust. The troops are utterly exhausted. Yesterday, one regiment walked 54 kilometers, another 47 kilometers. It is possible to do that once. But if the troops have already done various marches of 30 to 40 km before and are expected to do the same afterwards, then these efforts are huge. Besides, no one really sleeps properly during the night. At 2 or 3 a.m. we head off and march until night, sometimes until 10 p.m. Even if there is a rest at midday, we usually have no water and must stay in the blistering sun. Lucky the one who finds a little river. Then everyone tears their clothes off and jumps into the water, even if it is dirty. Water is a godsend. We are now in real Russia. Kapil is the name of the village today. Everything is completely rotten. We learn to know the blessings of Bolshevik culture. The furniture is very primitive. We usually live in empty rooms. Walls and ceilings are covered with painted stars of David. Churches serve as halls for political meetings. In every village are big party houses to glorify Stalin and Lenin as favorites of the people, of children, women, workers, soldiers, etc. In the cities there is usually a statue of Stalin built from cement in the marketplace in the center, very much like the old Hindenburg. There are no shops. The peasants have to work for the community. They receive 1/3 of the harvest in food and 80 rubles annually. A kilogram of butter costs 36 rubles. As payment for his work, every comrade was also entitled to some items such as soap, cigarettes, socks, 1 suit a year, which he could get in state depots in every city. That is the Soviet paradise. No one dares to speak openly. Everyone is afraid to talk. They deported children aged 15 to the mines at the River Don. These children never heard of their families again and vice versa. Some of them, who are now soldiers, we have taken as prisoners. Now the people here hope to get rid of this pressure. It is a great disadvantage that we cannot communicate with them. This is the reason for many mistakes. In the meantime, the Bolshevik is fighting at the river Dnieper. He has already crossed the river at some places. For us, it means running, running, running until our tongues are hanging out. I think they will abandon the infantry after the war. Human power and motor power is too much of a difference. Hartmut is at the river Dnieper. May God help him. Letter to his wife, the 13th of July, 1941. The heat and the dust are killing us. It gets hotter and more humid every day. We do not feel like eating, just drinking. We try to march only during the afternoon and at night. It is simply not bearable during the day. Today the heat is so bad that I can hardly write a letter. The sun is seldom out, but the air is indescribably heavy. One does not feel like doing anything. Yesterday I flew to Minsk. Being up in the air at 600 meters altitude was pleasant. The view was terrific. Endless forests, rivers meandering like earthworms, marching columns smaller than toys. Minsk, half of it destroyed, only a few multi-story Soviet palaces left. The Gauleiter House, the University Building, the House of the Red Army. Flaunty, ugly palaces, all of them filled with pictures glorifying Stalin, Lenin, Kalinin and others. All churches are destroyed, here in real Russia. The crosses have been removed from the steeples. The Greek Catholic Church has been destroyed here in Slutsk. Using the old bricks of the church, a Gauleiter house is under construction at the same spot. The Roman Catholic Church has been turned into a soda water factory. The Protestant church is merged with another factory. As far as we could see, all churches in the villages are turned into fire engine houses or warehouses. Will the wrath of God descend upon the destroyers? Soon we will be involved in the miserable guerrilla warfare and have to tidy up the forest. Letter to his wife, the 20th of July, 1941. The Russian is very strong and fights desperately, urged on by his commissars. Combat in the woodlands is particularly bad. All of a sudden, the Russian appears everywhere and fires and attacks columns, individuals and messenger vehicles alike. By any standards, the war is really bad here. On top of that, the incredible transport problems, the vast space, the endless forests, the difficulties in communicating with the people, etc. All previous battles were probably child's play compared to the combat right now. Our losses are substantial. They are huge on the Russian side. The terrible leaden heat has given way to cooler weather. I am still healthy. I do not get much sleep, and I face a tremendous amount of mental stress at some times. I have a bath in the river Berezina every day to relax, or I take the Storch and fly over the forest between my two groups. It is 75 kilometers by car, and the road is in bad shape. Many miles through the lonely forest, where there had been fighting the day before. That was not exactly pleasant. Our men are physically exhausted. Yesterday I found some of the carriage drivers sleeping like the dead in front of their horses. Tremendous marches, unbelievable roads. No one in Germany can even start to imagine the state they are in. And huge mental stress due to changing circumstances, and the risk for everyone to be attacked from ambushes. These things are more than distressing, and have never been experienced before in any other campaign. And no one knows how long this battle will last. There is no sign of an end at the moment, despite all the victories we have won. Hopefully Russian resistance will break down someday. Even for them, the situation is far from desirable. Quite the opposite. Things are indeed looking bad for them. For the second Tiln, they were able to break through at several points. But the cut-off troops fight bitterly, and it does not seem as if the Russians' will to resist is already broken, or enough to capture 2 commanders' cars of a Russian staff with the division clerk. A typist lady with a blue skirt and white blouse escaped at the last moment. The clerk told us that some days ago their division commander had been dismissed due to poor performance, and was then appointed to command one of the regiments of his division. Tomorrow we will start new battles. The Russian is hit very hard. It is almost a miracle that he again and again finds the strength for resistance despite casualties and losses. Now it is all about who will persevere the longest. Taking into account the ongoing subversion and disintegration, it makes one think that the whole business over there has to break down one day, even though it will certainly take a while. We have seen entire companies defecting, and the dismissal of senior commanders of all kinds of ranks is not a good sign. War report to his family, the 18th of August, 1941. The Russian defeat at Gomel is a severe blow for our enemy, who fights with formations that are merely thrown together, who has hardly any compact divisions left, and who was forced to leave a not yet fully assessed but considerably large amount of cannon and vehicles in the forests. In operative terms, it is the end of the southern half of the Russian center front sector and will have far-reaching repercussions. Thus, we can be satisfied with the last 10 or 12 days. I had a hard time. We had to solve very critical situations, and at times the stress reached a maximum. It is not exactly enjoyable to travel through the vast country meagerly accompanied, through miles and miles of forests, subjected to the risk of encountering Russians at any moment. The front lines are extended and porous to such an extent that the area is crowded with friend and foe alike. In a critical situation 8 days ago, I myself took command of a battalion in a state of complete confusion. 2 days ago, 2 Russian heavy batteries attacked us. We were driven out of our command post, and it was a miracle that only 7 were injured. There was much to fear for every one of us, and we can only be grateful that everything went well so far. There were many moments when it might have taken a different turn. I am writing in a tent pitched up near a half-ruined Kolkot's barn, on the edge of a potato field, which was hit by heavy Russian shells at a distance of 200 steps the day before yesterday. But now the cannon are silent and will never fire again. They are left somewhere in the forest, and the artillerists are taken prisoner. The Russian commanding general of the 66th Corps, my first counter-duelist, was court-martialed at the beginning of August, as an order shows that we captured. Yesterday, the second commanding general of the 68th Corps and 2 of his commissars tried to escape. When they did not surrender, our men shot them. Everything over there is heading towards a crisis. The breakdown is looming. Letter to his wife, the 19th of August, 1941. The first operation period is over. 2 Russian corps with 7 divisions are destroyed. We ourselves have taken almost 10,000 prisoners, the whole army around 50,000 altogether. There are huge amounts of war material, mostly artillery, vehicles left in the forests. The Russians have driven it in the swamps so that we cannot use it. After the front lines got mixed up in the wake of the encirclement and the enemy formations broke up, there are lots of single Russians or groups of soldiers in the forests again. Numerous Russians try to hide or to avoid being taken prisoner by using hidden paths. Letter to his wife, the 23rd of August, 1941. The Russian shows a huge amount of resilience despite all his defeats. Yesterday I read the statement of a Russian army commander-in-chief who claimed that they would keep on fighting even if Moscow FLL. I assume he is right. There will only be change when the system in Russia collapses from the inside. I doubt that the preconditions are met yet. It seems as if the dreadful Russian terror system silences every opposition. In the wake of our unexpected attack on Russia, it is plausible that many Russians, even those opposing Stalin, have changed sides and support their leader out of patriotism. We are now deployed at a different position within our army, with different divisions. We have moved almost 200 kilometers deeper into Russia. The cities are all utterly burnt. We are camping, one cannot call it living, in the bleakest and most desolate villages. Today I am staying in a classroom, since schools are usually the cleanest buildings. All the houses are really shabby. According to the inhabitants, it is their intention to make everything look ugly and poor, so that they are not persecuted for being wealthy. The war here costs us. Was it really necessary? Letter to his wife, the 1st of September 1941. Since a couple of days ago, we have been in heavy combat again. We have been redeployed south again and are at the northern border to the Ukraine. Our task is difficult, all the more so in light of our limited forces. The Russian fights back with huge resilience and counterattacks. His artillery is particularly good. I can hear the grenades hit ting the ground while I am writing this letter. The day before. Yesterday, the Russians kept us under heavy fire for a quarter of an hour. On top of that, bombers were flying raids on our village and caused several losses, including the commander of the headquarters. It is hard to find time and inner peace to write. The situation is continuously changing, and there are always new challenges coming up. This has been going on incessantly for 10 weeks. The one I admire the most is the ordinary infantryman who endures everything here, day and night, without having proper quarters. At least the weather is quite pleasant. It has been continuously warm apart from only a few days during the entire summer. I am convinced that this war will last a long time. There will not be an end of it this year. The Russian hopes for the winter. During this period, he will reorganize his damaged army and attack again in spring by command of the English and at his own wish. The English and Americans are happy that the National Socialists and Bolsheviks weaken each other and hope that they will no longer be a threat. Anyway, we have to prepare ourselves for another year of war. Diary, the 11th of September, 1941. Meeting with the Commander-in-Chief of the Second Army, Colonel General von Weichs. New operation against Kiev. The Army Group withdraws the 8th Corps with the best 2 divisions from the priority flank, which forms the northern pincer. The Army Group Centre is not interested in the situation of the Army Group South. Instead, it is giving orders to hurry up. Our troops are dead tired, exhausted and weakened. These people over there are short-sighted. They only think of their own operation. This is our perspective. Everyone involved is speechless in view of this decision. One can only shake one's head. I told the senior commanders of the army to give the troops a rest for a couple of days. They would show their gratefulness with a better performance. Everyone who knows the business agrees. Our army tries to do its best in this regard. War report to his family, the 12th of September, 1941. The state of the Russian troops that we encountered has without doubt worsened lately. In particular, the Russian infantry is a wild, chaotic bunch of units scratched together, which are thrown into battle as they go along. Regiments filled with hardly trained replacements, divisions consisting of the rest troops of 2 or 3 former ones are commonplace. Panzer Corps act as infantry without tanks. Airborne brigades have nothing to land with. Nevertheless, we still encounter masses of people with our weakened units. Someone once said that if out of 1,000 shooting idiots only 50 hit our men, then we will suffer more from these losses than the enemy. Alas, the Russian artillery is very good. They shoot well, have lots of hits, and are unfortunately very versatile. The pilots are also dashing and fly in the worst weather conditions. It was not until our fighter aircraft shot down 15 of them that we had a bit of relief. We Germans particularly dislike the Russians' deceitful way of combat. He is rarely seen in the open country, and if so, then only hidden in cornfields. Most of the time he crawls through the forest, through bushes and through the swamps. The Russians attack from ambushes. These people are glued to the unclear terrain like lice, and one cannot get rid of them even by combing the area twice. Thus, combat here is more than challenging for our troops. One has to raise one's hat to them and their efforts. They have been attacking for 11 weeks, sometimes in the morning, sometimes at midday, and always in front of the enemy, every night outside, not knowing if the brown guys are coming or not. This tension, every day being shot by big nasty grenades, every night outside in the wet cold, in the meantime walking through knee-deep mud or being completely covered in dust. The effort is utterly great. No one can imagine how much we demand from our soldiers, unless one has experienced it oneself. The attitude of the Russian military leaders is inexplicable. They do things we cannot comprehend, and which seem to be quite unreasonable. For instance, everyone who does not hold his position is going to be shot dead. When we asked the Russian Chief of Staff of the Lexyet Corps why he did not withdraw his corps when there was still time, he answered, he had requested it twice of his army commanders. No one over there is allowed to do anything on their own responsibility. They have to ask their superiors for permission. His army left his requests unanswered and sent the messenger back. That is how the military leaders avoid responsibility. As a result, the Russian corps stayed at Gomel and was lost. In a similar manner, some of our own divisions were caught in a completely senseless position. The people over there have the choice of being killed either by a court-martial, by a commissar, or by the Germans. The commissars keep telling their troops every day for hours that we will definitely not only shoot them, but torture them first. That is why the Russian soldier defends himself so desperately, because he expects to be killed in an even crueler way by us. These primitive people believe everything. Besides, the prisoners are convinced that Russia will continue this war even if we reach the river Volga. According to them, it is a question of life and death for Bolshevism, and compromise is not an option. There are enough people. And it is true, we have only seen old men, women and children in the occupied territories. All men are taken and turned into soldiers or factory workers. I'm also convinced that the tough willpower of the leaders on the other side will do everything to keep going. They hope in particular for the winter, which will hinder us and give the Russians time and opportunity to reorganize. The only logical consequence for us is to hit the Russians hard before the roads become impassable, so that their forces are severely damaged, and reorganization becomes, at least, a difficult task due to the new losses. I would like to think that is possible. The state of the enemy army and the leaders' often strange fallacies give cause for hope. All the more if we can eliminate the armaments industry on an even larger scale, which is not at all impossible. For 2 weeks we have been in the northern Ukraine, nor far away from Kiev. On the map, the country is separated from Belarus by a proper border. The terrain is marked by the destruction of almost all linking roads. There are only a very few major roads, and all by-road bridges are destroyed. The weather is still warm, the roads are finally solid. Instead of being sandy like in Belarus, they are clay here in the Ukraine. The people are better dressed. For weeks we have seen women running around with bare legs. Here they wear high boots. The villages are at least 2 kilometers in diameter, sometimes even 8 to 10 kilometers. They are surrounded by tobacco and sunflower fields, again a popular hiding place for Russian soldiers. Everyone chews sunflower seeds, we too. We have seen large quantities of cattle, as elsewhere, by the way, since we have crossed the German border. Pigs are running freely in the streets and in the houses, often infected with trichinosis. There is no shortage of crops, even though the soil is not cultivated as productively as it could be by our standards. Thus, we hope to get a lot out of the conquered territories during the next season. At the moment, we feast on honey, which we have in abundance. Chicken and entire geese flocks populate the vicinity of the villages. In my opinion, the kolkhoz system has an advantage. Big fields, similar to our system of land tenure, supersede a system of small fields owned by single peasants. This is a more efficient way of feeding the population. But when we occupy a village, the first thing the village folk ask is, when do we get our land back that has been taken away from us? Apart from that, everything here is in a terrible and desolate state. Everybody tries to display a poor lifestyle in order not to be persecuted or shot as a property owner. Consequently, houses and flats are mostly beyond description. A peasant who has not joined the kolkhoz system but wants to work on his own account. This is possible when farming on a very small scale, that is, on a property which feeds 1 cow, does not get any straw for his roof and no timber to mend his house and barn, and has to pay a huge amount of fees of all kinds to force him into the system. This leads to severe poverty. Even worse, however, is the people's fear of the party and its representatives. No one dares to do any G on their own responsibility, but waits for an order so as not to be punished. Thus, they started cutting hay only when the order to do so was given, regardless of the weather. One can imagine the damage caused in agriculture by this amount of bureaucracy. There is only one thing of high quality here in Lucia, the school buildings. They are huge, bright, spacious and clean without exception. Down to every little village, schools are well equipped with teaching material for physics. We take up quarters only in school buildings because it is the best accommodation possible. Recently, we have been in a village called Siedniu at the River Snow, where once a Cossack prince owned a huge estate of around 150,000 acres. Now the palace is completely empty, ruined and run down. A lecturer from Königsberg named Beutelsbacher, born in the Ukraine and now working as a lieutenant in our intelligence section, had visited the estate with his parents when he was a child and told us about the wealth of the palace, the wonderful park, now a jungle, the library with valuable manuscripts and the lavish lifestyle. None of it was left. Only an age-old lime tree was still there, 400 years old, knobby and gnarly, and next to it the bust of the Ukrainian national poet who used to live with the prince's family 250 years ago. Our soldiers beheaded the statue because they thought it was Stalin. Diary entry, the 13th of September, 1941. We came through Chernigov yesterday, arguably the city that has been hit the hardest by the destructive forces of the war. Literally, everything is in ruins. Only some churches are left, but their interiors are completely destroyed. Such a destruction of the cities as in this Eastern War is probably comparable only with the 30 Years' War. Colonel General von Schobert hit a mine and was killed. Manstein is his successor. Schobert was not a bright man, but very ambitious and vain, yet also very brave. Letter to his wife, the 15th of September 1941. The war has severe battles in store for us in autumn, and the decisive battle has not been fought yet. Certainly the Russian is weak, but the last hit, which will hopefully substantially decimate, is still to come. Yet I do not believe that Russia will surrender before this winter, even if we win this decisive battle. The country is so huge, there are so many people. For the time being, the Russians pin their hopes on America's and England's help. Both will do their utmost to support this ally, who is a crucial pillar in their fight. The Russian has tied up the entire German Wehrmacht and has caused it considerable casualties, among them the best. You should see how tired and exhausted our troops are. 3 months of terrible fighting and marching have left their marks on them. We cannot hope for an end to this campaign, and there is no way that we will get leave in the autumn. You have to bear that in mind. The fighting in Russia will go on until the weather puts an end to it. War report to his family, the 15th of September 1941. We are just about to encircle the Russian. All troops west of Kiev will bite the dust. For some reason I cannot comprehend, the Russian has assigned his troops in the Ukraine in a way that invites us to take them all prisoners. The encirclement is getting tighter. In a week there will probably be a special announcement declaring another substantial victory. Apart from its military impact, it is also very important in economic terms, since new vast areas of the Ukraine, the most valuable part of Russia, will fall into our hands. Our interpreter insists the Ukraine could feed the whole of Europe. Russia would starve without the Ukraine. I am fine with that. Overall, these victories are a result of our battles since the 4th of August, when my corps started attacking in the area south of Bobruisk. These were the first steps, and now we will finalize it. We are already positioned deep in the back of Russia's most southern army group. We already fight for the roads that will be essential for the enemy's retreats. While I am writing this, I can hear artillery fire rolling continuously. The enemy puts up tough resistance. Yet slowly but steadily he is driven back, leaving one position after another, until he is finished after all. We will not stay here for the final battle. After having initiated the encirclement and half achieved it, we will be pulled out and redeployed elsewhere. We are not pleased about that. Like everyone else, we would rather have completed what we have been preparing for months. The encirclement of Kiev would have been the capstone of these efforts. Apart from that, we would rather stay here in the south instead of moving to colder parts of the country. And we fear that it will be much more inhospitable there than it is here, since for mid-September the weather is reasonably good. The nights are getting cooler, but the daytime can be really hot. The whole country is much cleaner, friendlier and better equipped than forbidding Belarus. The churches in the Ukraine still have crosses. In some remote areas, even the interior furnishing has survived. It seems, overall, as if the Bolshevization of the country has not been as intensive and far-reaching as in the rest of Russia. A small remnant of independent life has remained.